Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is George Ortega. I'm here with Lionel Ketchen, and we're here to talk about happiness because happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all. Today we're going to be talking about what happiness is, and I think we've got to start the show off really by reiterating our introduction. Happiness is why we're here. I mean, it's the reason we wake up each morning. It's the basic reason we do anything in life. It's the most important part of life. Happiness is really, the foundation, the principal reason and goal of why we live, or what our existence means.
Yeah, George, I think that is the point of it all. And when I had found out that happiness was very important to me, and I was following it, I was really surprised that Aristotle had said that everything is a means to an end except happiness, and happiness is an end in itself. I mean, that's so profound. It's almost, and it's so simple to understand. Everything we do so we derive happiness from it. Yet we don't go to the source first. We never go right to the end all. I mean, happiness is it. We could go right to that, take all the happiness we can handle, and then do whatever we've got to do in life with happiness. Right. And instead we go around it backwards.
Right, so what is happiness then? I mean, in order to define it really the most clearly, happiness is very simple. It's just an emotion. I mean, that's all it is. It's an emotion. And here's the way it works. Basically, the better we get at extending that emotion, of focusing on it and extending it for periods of time, then we create happy moods. Okay, so our emotions, the better we get at, we create happy moods. The more happy moods we have, the more of a happy person we'll be. It's that simple. It all starts out with the basic emotion of happiness, and happiness is really as simple as extending that throughout our days, throughout our lives.
Yeah, and I agree. I also have heard that happiness is called a feeling. I agree it's an emotion. What do you think about a feeling?
No, basically, feeling and emotion in psychology are very intertwined. Emotion is generally like a physiological state. A feeling is more kind of like a reflection of that physiological state that we are in touch with. I mean, theoretically, it may be possible to not be in touch with an emotion, whereas like the feeling kind of denotes a kind of emotion that we're more in touch with. But those two terms are very interchangeable.
Right, like we might feel pleasure, right? You could feel pleasure, you could derive a state of good feeling from pleasure, and happiness can be, could be called pleasure. I like to think of it as more than pleasure, but I know you've referred to it as pleasure, which it is, but that's a pleasurable feeling, so it's part of it. And we also have the word state. Now, I actually define happiness as an inner state of well-being. That's how I like to define it. And state, again, encompassing all the aspects of what we're talking about, the feeling, the emotion. That's the state.
Well, again, what happens is like we start off with emotion, and then we create moods, and ultimately the state results.
Yes, yes. And it's a wonderful state to be in.
Oh, yeah. And you were saying that happiness is much more than an emotion. It certainly is. Happiness is, as Aristotle said, the highest good.
Yes.
And then when you think about it, well, why is it the highest good? Because what's the reason for goodness in general? What is goodness about? Goodness is about creating pleasure. It's about creating happiness. So if we're happy, if happiness is our main concern, if we're feeling that happiness, we're basically we have achieved the goal for ourselves, and that allows us to express that goal in our interactions with the world and interactions with other people.
Okay, so are you saying that once you have arrived at that state yourself, that in being in a happy state, you could share it with others? Is that why it's the highest good? Because a happy person will share that pleasure with others and want to give pleasure to others and not hurt others, for example, and that's why it's called good?
Well, yeah, that's the reason why. Yeah, I think that kind of pretty much explains it. It's the idea that goodness is by definition what creates happiness, and so if happiness is the point of goodness, then certainly happiness has to be the highest good.
Yes.
It's the actual point of it. All right, let's again, we want to go through all these different kinds of definitions of what happiness is. Happiness also happens to be a choice. Why don't you explain that?
Okay, yeah, a choice is something comes up and you've got to choose between two things. Now, you can also choose not to do anything or do nothing and think you're not making a choice, but that in itself is a choice as well. So, no matter what you're doing or not doing, or anything you're doing or not doing is a choice. So, sitting in the chair, moving one hand, everything's a choice.
Talk about the happiness decision, because you bring that up in your club all the time.
Okay. Now, I feel happiness needs to be understood and as a benefit. So if you can finally get the understanding that happiness is a decision. In other words, you're not going to see it, you're not going to have it, unless you decide this is something you want. Once you've decided that this is for you, then you just wear it like a suit of clothes. You just wouldn't go out of the house without clothing on, so I wouldn't leave without being happy. And it's being happy that the decision is based on, not wanting to be happy, not being happy in some future time. Being happy means right now, no matter what. No matter what's happening, no matter how I'm, what's going on inside of me, it's being happy. Now, actually, I get elevated to a different point when I'm happy. It doesn't matter if I've got problems. I'm able to deal with those problems so much better. But there's a mechanism between the decision and the choice. I like to think that the decision brings you to the bottom of the stairway of happiness with one foot on the first step. After that, life is about steps. Things will happen to you, and as long as you take the next step, which is a choice, up, and that's happiness, things will always work out.
All right, so basically, the idea is that that basically we can, happiness isn't something that we have to wait to come to us or that we have to be fortunate and receive. Happiness is something we can decide to be in a state of. We can decide to feel, we can decide to prolong as much as possible. And that's important because that basically means that happiness is in our hands. It's not out there, it's not a matter of fortune or fate. It's really what we decide. It's that simple. And that's I think, something very important that for people to understand. I think something else we want to explore is the idea that that happiness is, we can consider happiness a destination. It's like we have many kinds of destinations in our lives, destinations in terms of our careers, destinations in terms of our social lives, our achievements. But when you think about all of these other destinations, happiness actually is the ultimate or highest destination, because everything, again, every kind of goal that we create, that we work on, and that we ultimately achieve, is really a means to that final destination of happiness. But there's also the concept that happiness is not just a destination, it's a journey. Why don't you explain that?
Well, yeah, on your way to the destination, if you're not having a good time, you really, the destination is over like that. Once you're there, you're there.
Although not with happiness. I mean,
no,
you're there.
Yeah, okay. Well, but most people think of it as the final stop.
Right.
But if you're not enjoying the journey, you're missing all of the fun, right? I mean, because the trouble with I agree.
Well, happiness is the journey.
I agree that happiness, that's what I'm saying is happiness is the journey. But a lot of people mistake it for only being the destination. And I think that's the point we're making now.
Right. It's the idea, that it's not something that we have to wait to finally arrive at.
Exactly.
It's the process of deciding in this moment to be and feel very happy is that journey that ultimately leads us to the destination.
Right. And I think the journey is sometimes you feel like you're not headed for the destination, but that's because you're not using happiness during the journey. You've somehow forgotten about happiness, And that's when you run into trouble.
Right. You bring up something really important.
Okay.
We forget about our destination,
Yeah.
and that's basically happiness is about focus.
Right.
It's about focus. It's about memory. I mean, we can choose to focus on getting things right, on succeeding, on doing whatever we want to do. When we're choosing to focus on that, it's also sometimes difficult to focus on our happiness. We forget that. We lose that focus.
Right.
We can learn to focus on doing whatever we're doing and feeling good and enjoying it at the same time.
Right, that's very true. And, yeah, you're right. And George, I want to make another point that you bring up. If you're not happy during the journey, you're headed in the wrong direction anyway, because you're not headed for happiness.
Right.
Unless the journey is happiness, the destination isn't the right one.
Yeah, sometimes, sometimes people are fortunate. Sometimes people will choose, let's say, a destination of making a lot of money or achieving something, and that they'll be fortunate enough that they enjoy doing that, and that will result in happiness. Sometimes people will decide to, for example, to get married. But marriage is a great way to become happier. So,
yes.
But again, a more direct way is to simply choose happiness, from the beginning. And that's not to say we can't choose other goals. But if we have happiness as our main choice, then it makes it much more easier. Let's talk about also the idea that happiness is something that it's kind of like something to remember. That happiness is really a memory.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, if you forget, that's why I like to make it. Once it's a decision, you're more inclined to remember it if it's a decision, because that's your intention, and then it's still a choice. But I'm telling you, you only have to make one choice, and that's happiness always. But if you forget that one thing, then you've forgotten it. But no matter, like when you ask yourself, what do I do now? I got a problem. What do I do now? Your choice is you pick happiness, because then all of the other choices will come to you.
Right, and the idea is we've got a lot of things in life that we need to remember, related to work, related to whatever we're doing. But it's very important to always remember to stay in touch with our happiness, to stay to keep that in focus. So in a sense, in a sense, happiness is our most important memory, because the idea is that happiness is a feeling, and we can memorize, we can remember feelings. We go on vacation and we go to this great island somewhere.
That's true.
And we take that feeling back with us, all right? And because vacations tend to be actually the happiest parts of many people's lives. So again, with happiness, we can understand that it's something to be remembered, to be memorized, and to be recalled as often as possible. Then what happens is, as we spend time doing that, then habit takes over, because happiness is also a habit. And then ultimately we don't have to think about our happiness, because it's automatic, it's habitual, and we're constantly remembering to stay focused on it.
Very good. I mean, you hit the nails on the head. Perfect.
Okay, happiness is also a philosophy, because it's a way of living, it's a way of seeing the world. We can see the world through a competitive philosophy, through a moralistic philosophy, a religious philosophy. There are different kinds of ways to see the world. But with happiness, we can choose to have happiness be our guiding philosophy, so that, again, whatever we're doing, whatever we're striving for, it fits within that philosophy. It's a way of viewing the world. It's a way of thinking, and we can apply that to every aspect of our lives.
Absolutely. And I personally think religion, even the world's religions, all religions, maybe the word didn't exist at the time they were, the leaders of the different religions were writing all this down or transcribing it. But behind all of that was bliss and joy and inner peace. This is what happiness is all about. And we miss these things when we don't live with this as a philosophy. If we don't live with that philosophy of happiness, then for sure we've missed happiness. I mean, that's number one. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the philosophy of happiness doesn't just give you happiness. It acts like a magnet to draw the very best to you. And the reason is that even if it's a bad thing that you have to face, at least you're not going to succumb to the event in a negative way. You're going to choose the best choice available to you from a more positive, well-balanced state of mind, which happiness can give you. It can give you a better perspective for choosing what's best for you in that particular situation at that particular time.
Right. Oh yeah. Also happiness, like you were saying that that religion and our tradition, our culture, bliss. That's really what all that is about. Our education, our politics, our government, everything. I mean, basically, happiness is a purpose. It's the highest purpose. It's not just the highest good. It's not the point of our lives. It's the purpose of our lives, and it is the highest purpose, because anything, we have to kind of like also explain that it's not just our happiness, okay? Because like any time that we're kind of like deriving our happiness at the expense of others, that is happiness, all right, but you can't call that a good or ethical happiness, I mean, since it's possible to be both happy and happy in a way that contributes to the happiness of others, then that's really the best approach.
Well, and I'm not trying to contradict you or disagree with you, but I think if true happiness, if it's not beneficial to all people, then it probably is a sub-level happiness. It may give you a feeling of pleasure, but it isn't sustained, and it gives you gaps of unhappiness by the very token that if you do something that would hurt other people, then you do it because you have to sustain this pleasure that you've become addicted to, and then you'll keep doing things to hurt others in spite of them, and it's just a vicious cycle. So real happiness is very outward and expanding and very giving, and it really hurts no one to be really happiness.
I think there really is only one happiness. There's an ethical happiness, a way to achieve it ethically, and not. And like you were saying, when you achieve it in ways that aren't ethical, then there is justice in the world. I mean, like God or nature will, if we take our happinesses at the expense of others, make our happiness perhaps more difficult to achieve.
I agree.
But the other very important reason why it's very important to achieve happiness through goodness, and again, goodness is really what creates that most happiness for the most people, is that as we derive our happiness from being good, and as we are good, other people will become happier, and feelings are contagious. The happier other people become, the easier it will become for us to be even happier.
Yeah, that's why I have a happiness club. I mean, absolutely right. It's so much nicer to surround yourself with other happy people, although I'm willing to accept everybody into my life, but you're right, you hit it on the head. It is contagious, and that's another wonderful aspect. It's almost like a positive disease that you could go out and spread.
Oh yeah. Okay, happiness. What else is it? Happiness is a success. Okay. We spend years in school trying to succeed at acquiring academic knowledge, trying to succeed at learning and remembering. Then we'll spend years on a job trying to succeed at whatever that job is, regardless of what it is. We'll try to be successful people, which means, perhaps making a lot of money or having a certain amount of prestige, whatever. So there are many kinds of success, but really the only success that's of any value, the success with the highest value is happiness. Because when you think about it, all those other successes, why are they good? Why are they vital for a person? They're good and vital only to the extent that they make the person happy, and perhaps hopefully help others to become happy. So the idea is that this is good, because like if one finds that one hasn't succeeded in any part of life, if one is like just wasn't good in school, didn't get a good job, isn't very rich, whatever, but manages to be very happy, that person is really much more successful than a person who has all those other blessings, richness, fame, everything, but is less happy. Think about it. Happiness is the only real success in life.
Yeah, and you remind me of something that Tony Robbins brought up, and he's done a lot of work with success. He makes people successful, but one of the things he said regarding happiness and success is he said, I used to try to be successful so I could be happy. Now I'm happily becoming successful. So what he's doing now is he's using happiness as a way, as part of the journey along the way to the destination. So the success is there, but with happiness, I think it's even more attainable. If it's there, it's there. If it's not there, you lose nothing. You don't become unhappy because you didn't hit your goal. You've got tomorrow to do it. You're already there.
You're already there. That
exactly.
is the goal. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, so again, this is kind of in line with happiness being a philosophy. Happiness is also an understanding. And what I mean by that is it's kind of like a skill. It's a knowledge base. It's the idea that researchers have studied happiness for about 40 years comprehensively. There's a lot that's known about it. A lot of it isn't cause knowledge. In other words, sometimes they're not certain whether something causes happiness or happiness causes that something. A lot of times it's both. It's, the correlation goes in both directions. But the idea is that there's a lot of knowledge about happiness, and happiness is really about understanding what happiness is and understanding how to acquire it. So it's really a kind of knowledge. And when you think about knowledge, basically the purpose of all knowledge, this was understood since the time of early yogic writings, is happiness. Any kind of knowledge that doesn't lead to happiness is kind of like trivial and insignificant. So again, the most important kind of knowledge, the most important kind of understanding has to be happiness.
Yeah, and also happiness is motivation. I know for myself, I started giving talks on motivation in 1983, and I called it positive thinking, and that's how I started. But all of that work brought me to happiness, because in the end, happiness was the highest motivation you could ever get to. I mean, everything else seems to be, running and running to try to stay even or to try to get ahead, but it was tough. With happiness, you are ahead. You're never behind. And so it's the greatest motivator in the world, because it just makes you feel like $1 million all the time.
Yeah, and it's very important to talk about happiness as motivation, because we're raised in a world where we value goodness a lot. We value ethics. It's in our religion. It's in our ethical training, our philosophy, and all. And what happens is that generally our world has tried to motivate us to be good, ostensibly to become happier, so that everyone else can be happier. But that philosophy, that kind of understanding has been tried for about 2,000 years. It's the traditional, perhaps wisdom, more religious than just secular, but it's happiness through goodness, and it does work. But the good thing that is now beginning to be understood by researchers is that happiness is a wonderful motivator for goodness. They find that as people become happier, they become more compassionate, they become more agreeable, their relationships get better, they divorce less, they marry more. That has so many benefits that help people become happier. So if you want to help a person to become a better person, if you want to reduce the crime rate, you want to help children to develop in the best kind of people that they can be, teach them how to be very happy, and that'll provide them every motivation they need to understand that as long as they're very happy, they don't want to risk that happiness by doing things that are wrong, by being unethical, and that happiness will be a wonderful motivation to encourage them to then be good, to share that happiness with others and help others become happy also.
Absolutely, George. And another thing that happiness is it's a state of consciousness, or it's consciousness itself. And the way I would define that is happiness is consciousness, because when you're happy, you're basically choosing to be in a present state of mind. And you're not absent. You're not in the past. You're not worrying about the future. You're not agonizing over something in the past. You're not involved with fears. And being in that state of consciousness, you're connected to now. You're present within yourself, and I'm listening to the words you're saying much more readily with happiness. So I'm much more conscious of what you're saying. I'm not trying to figure out what I'm going to say next when you speak. This is an area that gets a little touchy, maybe, but I think when I try to figure out how could people be unhappy, I really believe in a way they're other than conscious. In other words, they're not present any longer. They're involved with their problems, their dilemma, their drama, their conflicts, and they've lost their ability to be in touch with the moment and with one another, and most of all themselves. So happiness is a consciousness.
It is a consciousness, definitely. It's kind of a consciousness we can choose, and in a certain sense, it's a consciousness that reflects a certain perspective. And that perspective is that we can choose to evaluate what goes on around us, what we feel, what we experience, what happens in a positive way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The psychologists define happiness as having three components, basically. One is feeling positive, pleasant feelings. Two is not feeling negative feelings. And of course, we're going to always feel some negative feelings, and we won't feel positive feelings all the time. But the third major component is satisfaction. And satisfaction really is about evaluating. I mean, the way we derive satisfaction from our world is to take it from the perspective of seeing the good in it, seeing the glass as half full, being optimistic about it, appreciating the values of it rather than dwelling on the negativities. So really, in terms of like happiness being a consciousness, it's really a way of seeing the world in a perspective that sees the good, that is focused on deriving pleasure from the world, not focused on some kind of understanding that may seem accurate but it's less pleasant.
Yeah, very true. You know, I think another aspect of happiness is acceptance. I mean, when we're more accepting of ourselves and others, happiness can flow from that. And I think it's when we're in opposition and we create conflict over everything that we pretty much close the door.
All right, so what is happiness? Happiness is like, there's nothing more important. Happiness is what everything is all about. When the world finally realizes this, freedom was important to the world. Education was important a long time ago. Equality. There are a lot of things that our civilization has valued, and once the imagination is sparked in people, the world changes. And once people finally understand that happiness is what really the world is all about, our world is going to change dramatically.
Absolutely. And George, as you're saying that, I want to make one fast agreement with you that actually happiness is freedom. Ultimately, happiness is freedom.
Right, but happiness is much more than freedom, because like freedom is simply one means to happiness.
Okay.
All right, well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life. This is George Ortega and Lionel Ketchen saying, be good, think well, feel very happy, and I hope you'll join us next time on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful. It's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.